Hey everyone, welcome to the beautiful Scottish Highlands and welcome to another gear review by us Outdoor Intrigue. Today we're going to talk to you about the Suunto 7 Sports Smartwatch. It's an interesting offering and we'll dive right into it in just a second. I wanted to tell you that obviously with all our gear reviews, as with this one, we've bought the gear and used it for a considerable period of time. We're not talking about a couple of days or even a couple of weeks, we're talking about months or years on the gear reviews that we do, and we give it heavy use before we tell you what we think about it. Also, we don't accept offerings or sponsorships from the company, so you know that what you're getting is an honest and true reflection of what you actually are going to experience yourself. Alright, let's dive in. Okay, on the Suunto 7, let's get stuck into the materials and the stats. So up front, you've got Gorilla Glass on the screen, so it's pretty nice and tough, decent material. Not as good as some of the sapphire glasses out there, but it's still pretty premium. You've got a bezel, which is stainless steel on this model, and then the case itself is like a sort of a compound plastic, but it does feel pretty quality. They do a couple of even more premium models that use titanium in the casing, I think, but they're even more expensive and probably not worth the money, if I'm being honest with you, in a smartwatch, which you're likely to have to replace in a couple of years anyway. The straps on this are like a siliconized rubber that it comes with. They do different color options. Obviously this is a black on black option, which is pretty sleek, and it's pretty comfy to wear on the wrist, fits pretty nicely. It's got, like you see on a lot of smartwatches these days, like a quick release option for the strap itself, so you can easily change those out and put on other straps if they have the same lug size, and it is pretty standard lug size. You know, button placement's pretty good, it's pretty comfortable to wear overall. I have worn it for multiple hours at a time, and it does feel pretty nice on the wrist and fit pretty nicely. It's a reasonable form factor overall, so if you've got a small wrist, it's going to be big and it's going to probably be a little bit too big for you. But if you've got anything from a medium to a larger size wrist, I would say that it's pretty reasonable size-wise. The main problem is probably that it's quite thick, like a lot of Suunto watches, although not as thick as some of the Suunto watches. It's still pretty thick, so it sits quite far off of the wrist itself, which some people are going to find frustrating, particularly if you're not used to a larger watch on your wrist. But, you know, it's not too bad. It weighs 70 grams, so it doesn't feel heavy. It feels pretty light for a watch of this size, which is not bad. Battery life is quoted at all sorts of things depending on how you use it, and the reality is that's going to be the defining factor, how you use it. The sort of, you know, multiple days of life if you use it just with like no features, doing anything at all. Up to 12 hours of GPS tracking, well that's not true, I can tell you that for a start, unless you use it in the one particular mode. So battery life is a difficult one with this. My opinion on it would be it's bad. It's very bad. You know, this is an issue with these kinds of watches because it's a smartwatch and it uses an OLED screen that's really bright and gives a really good output. It means that it drains the battery life heavily, as well as then some of the other processor features. So that's the way that is. Right, moving on next, let's jump into some of the positives of this watch for you. So on the good, right, let's start with the good. And I wish there was more of it. But number one, that screen. It's a really lovely screen. It's probably one of the nicest watch screens in terms of definition and viewability that you'll see on the market. It's a really bright OLED screen and the output is just beautiful. You can see it in most types of light settings and you can really read detailed maps on there. It's really easy to see whatever you're looking at. It's just lovely to use. Obviously that drains the hell out of the battery, but it's a lovely feature nevertheless. Other things on the good that I would say are hugely positive about this watch, probably the main reason I bought it, and the only reason that I used it as much as I did, apart from getting an opinion to review it on, is the mapping. The maps on here are just stunning. They use like an open source map software, Suunto, and the way they've built it in, and the way you can use it with the GPS tracking when you're out hiking or running, for example, is really great. You can genuinely use it to navigate in extremely technical terrain in low visibility like you would a GPS unit. It's honestly incredible. The detail on the maps is great. They're easy to get onto the watch. It works in a really seamless fashion. When you download a GPS route onto the app, that will then give you the option to choose whether you want that on your watch or not. You choose you want it on your watch. When your watch is plugged in and charging and connected to your Wi-Fi overnight or during the day, it will then download a map for that area of the route that you've downloaded. So if you've got a GPS route downloaded on the watch, it will automatically get you a map for that area, which is just brilliant. So when you turn up at the place you're going to go for a trail run, for example, you're going to have a map pre-saved and ready to go, matching up with the route you're going to run. Means that you're not going to get lost. You're going to be able to navigate. You're even going to be able to have a little look around, maybe find some extra points of interest, things like that. And because it's touchscreen, super easy, right? It means that when you're out and about and you want to use a map, unlike on some of the Garmin models where you've got to use all the buttons to move around, which is, it's really a pain in the ass with mapping, this is really easy. You can scroll through the map, you can zoom and pinch to move in and out. It's really great. So that's hugely positive. And then I would say that the way that Suunto have included their usual sports tracking software aspects, so the sports themselves, the way in which they do the sleep tracking, the way in which they do some of the recovery features, is in line with what you'd expect from Suunto. It's pretty quality, it's pretty well made, it looks good. I'd say it's pretty usable overall, and generally speaking, that part of the software on the watch is a positive. I think that's probably honestly where the positives end. One other positive before I forget, the charger clips on nice and solidly, always an annoyance with watches. It doesn't disconnect too badly. Considering it's magnetic, it's pretty good. Right, now let's get on to the negative. And unfortunately, that's basically everything else that I haven't said in the positive about this watch. One, it's overpriced for what it is. If you're looking at other comparatives on the market, you can get something that's probably got better features, better build quality, better battery life in the same price range. So that makes it very difficult to sell straight off the bat, right? Extremely difficult. Number two, battery life. Battery life on this is terrible. It's like anything, if you're using it probably for the specific feature set that it's intended for, it might just get you through. Like if you're using it mostly working in an office and just reading messages, and then you go to the gym for an hour in the evening, it'll probably be all right. If you're using it really for anything outside of that, or you go even for a longer hike on a weekend, you're going to be annoyed that your battery's running out and you're having to charge it more than you should have to. So battery life is a real pain. And on a lot of smartwatches where you're trying to do sports tracking, that is true, but on this one it is particularly true because of that really bright, brilliant screen. Next up is on the GPS tracking itself. The GPS tracking and the routes it gives you are often not accurate enough. It's not good enough quality. What I see even on the best, so there's two settings. One is it tracks you every 1 second on the GPS, which is pretty standard. And even on that setting, I find that you're getting probably too much of a variance compared to other GPS trackers I've worn at the same time, and compared routes, it's out, which is not ideal. And then if you use it on the next setting up, which is the battery saving mode, which is tracking you every 10 seconds and using Suunto's Fuse Track software to then build a route between those points, it is really, first of all, not accurate, and second of all, still battery-wise not good enough. You might get 12 hours of GPS tracking, but only just. So frustrating on that side. Another negative, the heart rate sensor is a decent quality unit, but the readings that I've gotten off of it have never been as consistent as I'd like. I think there's not enough there to make it as accurate as it should be, and I don't know if it's the software or the hardware. It's very hard to tell. Other negatives on this watch that frustrated me to no end are the way in which Google has ingrained the Wear OS onto the watch itself, but that's really not their fault or Suunto's fault. It's just the platform they've gone for and the way in which they use it. I'm an iPhone user. This watch is terrible to use with an iPhone. You have to download an extra bit of software, and you consistently have to have that app open to keep it connected. I mean, that's just one of those things, I guess, but as an iPhone user, it's made it so frustrating to use, almost impossible at times. Another thing is the Bluetooth connectivity. If I had this watch connected via Bluetooth to my phone whilst I was out running, so that I could control the music, because you can control music through it, which is pretty cool. Then I had attached my Jaybird Vista headphones, which are also Bluetooth, not to the watch, but just to my phone. The fact that there was this Bluetooth connection and my headphones would mean that I would get consistent dropout on my headphones. So the Bluetooth connection on this almost requires like a dominance against other Bluetooth devices, because I've had my phone connected to more than one Bluetooth device at a time, particularly where they're not having to work consistently at the same time. But this watch seems to want an almost consistent connection, so you just get dropout on your headphones, which drove me mad. So that's another thing you really have to consider, and you wouldn't know until you tried it. I did contact them about it, and they didn't really give me any answer as to what it was caused by, or really even the fact that they accepted that it was an issue. The altimeter is another issue on this. You can't calibrate the altimeter, so you're getting altitude readings, and to be fair, they are pretty accurate most of the time, but like on a lot of watches, it'll let you calibrate it, so when you get a heavy weather change and maybe your watch is thrown out by it, you can recalibrate. On this, you can't do that. It just relies on it resetting itself through, I think, your phone software probably at some point via the app, which is hugely frustrating. So overall, I think there's just too much negative about this watch, and it's it's going to be a real hard sell for most people. That's the long and short of it. You know, there's a couple of positive features that are brilliant, need to be taken and run with by Suunto and built into something new, because on this watch itself, it's not good enough. It doesn't cut the mustard. It's not going to be a watch that I think is going to fill enough of what most people want from a sports watch, and therefore I just can't recommend it to you. And personally, I won't be keeping it. I'll be selling this one on, and I've moved on to other watches since, and I had hoped that maybe it would have a certain skill that it could fulfill for me, even as an additional watch, like the mapping be enough, but there's too much that frustrates me with it. The connection, the battery life, it's just a pain, to be honest. So yeah, sorry Suunto, and I hope that it was helpful for you guys. If you're looking at smartwatches out there, you know, check it out yourself, but bear in mind what I've said to you, there's probably going to be some real frustrations. I hope it's been helpful overall, and as always, thanks for watching. If you've got any questions at all, leave them down in the comments. I haven't been able to cover every single aspect here because there are a lot of features on this watch and lots of different functions, but if you want to know more about anything specific, leave it as a question and I guarantee I'll be able to answer it for you. And if you enjoyed it, then thumbs up, and check us out on Instagram as well, @OutdoorIntrigue. Really appreciate it, and take care everyone.